Welcome to this edition of When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine, a discussion of sustainability and what that means to you and me. I'm Jay Warmke.
And I'm Annie Warmke.
And today we're going to talk about managing a small town sustainably, or it's more than just sticking out a few recycling bins.
It is?
Right?
Oh my gosh.
And we're joined today with our special guest, Charlotte Colley. Is that how?
Yes.
That's the proper?
Yep.
And you're village administrator of New Concord, Ohio?
That is correct.
Correct. Okay,
Thanks for
tell us a
having me.
little bit about what you do, where you were born.
Yeah.
You know, what is
Right.
New Concord?
All that good stuff. So I grew up in Chandlersville, and I met you two through my family, which was pretty cool.
Long time ago.
Learning about all the
back
things
when
they
you
do.
were a young thing.
I know, not young anymore. But I grew up in Chandlersville. I attended Muskingum University in New Concord as an undergraduate and intended to go into the medical field. Found out that I really didn't mesh well with chemistry and microbiology, so I switched over to political science. That was more natural for me. Got my master's, ended up doing some local government consulting, worked for some bigger cities in the Columbus metro area and cities all over the country, doing local government stuff. And, excuse me, about 5.5 years ago, the long-term administrator in New Concord retired suddenly. I still have connections with Muskingum University, so some of the professors there got on the phone and said, you need to apply for this job, and took some convincing because we were pretty settled, but I'm glad I did because I got the job, moved to New Concord, and it's been a wonderful experience.
And New Concord's a beautiful little city.
It is.
I mean,
It's very nice.
right. And for those who are perhaps not aware, what is New Concord is famous for?
New Concord is the home of John Glenn.
That's right, John and Annie Glenn.
And Annie Glenn, exactly.
Yeah, don't forget her. He never did. He never did.
So they're forefront, and a lot of mines are Main Street. We in 2001, I believe, the house that he grew up in was actually moved to Main Street, and it's part of our East Muskingum Museum Association. It's also now with the Ohio History Connection. So it's got a bigger reach, which is really exciting. We have tour buses, people from multiple different countries all over the world coming to view the house, see the living history tours. It's really great.
Well, one of the things that that I'm interested in is how small towns are going to deal with things like climate change and increasing poverty, and then all the issues that college brings into a small town, and how you deal with the tourism piece and how that's done in a hopefully a more sustainable way. And I also know that you just got a woman mayor. She's been around for a while, involved in politics, but she moved from city council into being the mayor, and I wonder how that's going to influence policy with the town. So let's just talk a little bit about what your role is in the village and how you see yourself influencing policy.
And from a sustainable standpoint, we
Right.
don't
Don't
care
wanna
about
get into
potholes,
everything else,
right?
right?
Yeah, well, potholes are
Well,
pretty important in sustainability.
And you may want to let people know just how big. We keep saying
Right.
small town, but
Right.
what are we talking about specifically?
So we're talking about a population of 2,500, give or take, depending on the year and the college population. They're obviously included in our numbers. They're there 9 months out of the year. We have not seen a huge downturn in our population. We also haven't seen a huge uptick. We've been pretty stable for the past 10 years.
Just let me ask, though, does that change in the summer up or down? And what about the tourists? Do they stay around or do they leave?
Right. So absolutely. It goes down in the summertime. The 3 months that the university isn't in session, it goes down. Our population drops, but we see the community come alive in the summer, more so than during the actual school year. There are free concerts in the park, our pool's open, we have lots of different summertime events, so we see more of our community neighbors at that during that time, and everyone takes a little bit of a breather. We see more tourism during that point too. We're a transportation hub. We have I-70 to our south. State Route 83 coming right through town, US 40 bisecting town. It's our main street. So we have lots of travelers who are going from one area of the country to another, and they come through New Concord at one point or another. We see tourism, people just stopping in because we have an old cemetery and asking, I'm interested in this person. And so we're digging out the records, trying to help with that. So my role as village administrator is I'm basically the chief administrative officer. So I handle all the day-to-day operations. I oversee major projects that we get into. I work really closely with council and the mayor on things that they're doing, policies that they're considering. We do a lot of research and best practice research and trying to understand what other communities our size and even those that are bigger that we're trying to model after are doing and how best to implement things that fit us.
Is there a town that you're trying to emulate?
We look at different ones. A lot of times we look at Granville because we know that they started out in a similar situation and they're a college town as well. They've obviously grown much larger than us, especially with their proximity to Columbus. But some of the things that they have, like the restaurants and the more vibrant downtown, those are things that we definitely want to see.
What about towns like Oberlin or Kent? They have similar situation, but more progressive perhaps.
Right. So we've worked with some facilitators from the Ohio University Extension Office, and they have actually done work with Kent. So we get some of that from them in those conversations. But because Kent is such a large area, we really don't model after them very much just because of their size. Mm-hmm. We tend to stay a little smaller.
So in terms of climate change, which everybody's got to deal with, whether they want to or not. Mm-hmm. We've been saying that for a long time. We've been saying for near 20 years, you will be green whether you want to be or not. Which is to us what climate change often represents. But so what kinds of things are you doing to prepare for the changes that are coming and deal with the changes that are already here? And what are those changes for your community?
Right. So the main changes that we're seeing right now are things like major rain and storm events that are stronger, more frequent, happening in times that we historically have not seen them happen. Our rain events seem to be very sudden and dramatic, and they overwhelm us. So we don't necessarily see flooding. What we do see is a lot of inflow and infiltration into our sewer system, whereas before when we saw rain events, they weren't as dramatic, and everything had time to catch up. Because we have old sewer pipes and old, everything infrastructure is old, this has really been a wake-up call for us to try and fix that underground infrastructure and do it more quickly, which is something that since I've been here 5.5 years, we've been really pushing. Let's get the underground pipes taken care of. Let's get our infrastructure up to where it needs to be. So now we're really focusing hard on our sewer system because as we see more of that rain flow going into our sewer system, when we're treating it just like we're treating regular sanitary sewer, it's getting to the point where it's overflowing manholes. We're getting notifications from the EPA that you can't do that. So that's a big issue for us. It's also an issue when we see drought situations that maybe last longer than they normally would or are a little more severe. We're a surface water system. We have our own water utility, and that's concerning. We haven't been in a situation where we've had to restrict water for a long time, but every year when our upper reservoir, which is our backup, when it starts to drop, our water superintendent gets nervous, and I get nervous. So we start to pull out that contingency plan, like, okay, what are the next steps if it gets to this level? And thankfully, it's not been in that situation. So we're trying to deal with that ahead of time. We've worked out an agreement with Muskingum County. We now have an emergency water agreement with them, and they're going to be in 2020 building an emergency connection that's going to connect to our system. So when we need the water, if we need the water, we turn a valve and it's there. It's not going to supply our complete daily demand, but it'll be a huge assistance to us. Construction season is also impacted because of the rain season lasting longer into the summertime. The construction season can't start or can't pick up the way that it should, so it's going farther in. We're seeing more of our projects lasting into the fall, whereas they should have been done in the summer. So those are all things that we're immediately feeling right now.
Did you guys experience any of the road slippage that we've seen around? Because the last year or so was so wet that the ground just became saturated
Right.
and roads started caving in all over the place.
We have not seen that. What we have seen is a lot of downed trees, and it's not just downed trees. It's the wind ripping the trees out of the ground because the ground is so soft that it can do that. So that's one of the other areas we've been really pushing hard to get our street trees maintained, so that we're making sure that those trees that we have on our roadways are healthy, they're in good condition. We're replacing the ones that aren't there, so that helps with stormwater retention, those types of things. It's the trees that are on the private property that we're seeing some concerns about. So we're also trying to educate residents. I'm working really closely with AEP and their arm to, as we see trees that could be hazards, especially near power lines, trying to get them on the hook and say, hey, can you come and take care of these so we don't have to shut this road down when they do fall? So that's been just a lot more coordination with those different groups to try and take care of problems before they become problems.
Well, one of the things that occurs to me is another issue around sustainability practices for a community is tourism.
Yes.
Because you have an influx of students, so they're their own issue, and their trash and their infrastructure and their transport and all that. So maybe we can talk a little about that. But also in terms of tourism, so you've got this influx of these big buses that are polluting. You know, they carry 55 people. You've got people on those buses that tend to be older. They want to eat somewhere. They generate a lot of trash and pollution. So I wonder if you deal with any of that.
We have not noticed any major concerns with those buses coming through. Our focus tends to be trying to make sure that we have those restaurants and that convenience for them to be able to eat, grab coffee, do whatever they need to do. We're obviously working to make our community more walkable, which is a big thing, so that we're not all driving cars everywhere. I try to make it a point, especially when it's decent outside. I can walk to the university if I have a meeting. I don't have to drive, and it helps my waistline if I walk up the hill. So, trying to do those things. But with the tour buses, we want to encourage them to come, but we're also trying to make sure that we're doing the right things with them. We have a contract with Kimball, which has not only allowed us to reduce the cost of residential refuse collection in the village, because we did a large contract with them, so they're our sole provider. We also, because of that, were able to get recycling guaranteed for all of our residents. We have a 65-gallon recycling tote that they can use. We've been working really closely with Kimball to educate residents on what they can recycle and what they can't. We're trying to do a big push now with holiday time on these are the things Christmas related that can't go into that tote. Here's what you can put in, and just trying to do that education piece. So we're trying to be more sustainable on that end, but it's hard to manage tour buses when they're in and out.
Oh yeah, no, we know.
All right, well, I'm going to interrupt here and say that you are listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke. We're joined today by Charlotte Colley, the village administrator of New Concord,
It's not
Ohio.
a city yet.
Not yet.
And we want to remind you that it is indeed the end of the world as we know it.
And thank God.
Thank God, yes, the end of the world. And so what we're saying when we say that is that it's the way things have worked in the past no longer work. We're facing changes that we have to address, and as residents of your village, we're not residents, but we would have the ability to sit and complain. Well, now we want to see from your perspective, managing a small village or a small town, and I'm sure this extends to larger cities as well. What are your challenges? What's your vision about how you're going to deal with these
Before
things?
you answer that, I just want to say that the thing he didn't add is that it is the end of the world as we've known it, and now we're saying, what do we put in its place? And that's the whole purpose of the podcast, is to talk about what comes next or what's already happening. So not just, it's the end of the world. Oh, my God. It's not
What do
like
we
that.
do?
No, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing.
Right.
So, sorry.
Right. So my vision for New Concord, and again, my vision is put in with our village council and our mayor and all of our appointed and elected officials and staff members. We all work really well together as a team to put this in place. But I think that what we're looking to see is a more vibrant village. We obviously have sustained some of the major challenges over the last 10 to 15 years with recessions and things like that. We have not been immune to the drug epidemic, but it hasn't hit us as hard as some of our neighbors. Thank goodness. We've really tried to be proactive, and that's something that I think New Concord, for as long as I'm there at least, and I think past me, we're going to be proactive. We're going to want to try to be ahead of the curve on whatever those changes may be coming. So looking at encouraging entrepreneurs. We have a lot of university students who want to start businesses, who've started businesses out of their dorm room. Our 2 mayors ago, Greg Adams, he and a business partner of his started Resource Systems, which is healthcare software, out of their dorm room. It was purchased by Cerner. Really fabulous opportunity for a small community. So we have folks like that who want to turn those dreams into big dreams, and we want to encourage them to locate in New Concord and not take them somewhere else.
Well, when I was in college, I knew people who started businesses out of their dorm rooms, but they would not have been encouraged by the city fathers.
We have those
Today it would have been fine. So
Today
yes,
it's legal
yeah.
in several states. But
Well, one thing I just want to say is that what you're really talking about is building resiliency with your sewer systems and your water treatment and all that kind of thing. And I'm interested in the idea of encouraging people to be more resilient, to be more sustainable. And one of the things that we have looked at, especially in other communities, is a designation for groups like real estate and tourism, where if you're a hotel or a restaurant, or if you're selling your home, that there is the town or the village or the city would create some kind of designation, and the house actually, or the building, becomes more valuable because it's met certain standards, or the tourism site actually has more people interested in it because it has a designation. And I wonder if you've ever looked at anything like that.
So we haven't done anything to that level yet. We have, in our zoning code, tried to incorporate new sustainable practices that our residents and our businesses have asked us about and said, hey, would you consider this? Well, yeah, we'll definitely look into that. So most recently, we have expanded our allowances for solar to include larger solar arrays. Our local hotel, the Garland Hotel, has one of those solar arrays on their lot. They also have a wind turbine, which we've made an allowance for in our zoning code. So obviously, because of the size, it's got its place and its space on the outskirts of town. But we are willing to look at those types of practices and different methods to try and see, is it going to fit? How is it going to fit? What are other communities doing? And what's going to be most beneficial for New Concord? A project that we're working on with the university right now, a new building that they're putting in place, and I don't want to give away any secrets, but I do know that there is a component for solar power on the roof, and if it goes through the way that they're talking, that could be a major impact on their electricity bill and their draw on the system, which is really, really great. They're thinking in a more sustainable way in terms of that environmental component. So we don't have designations, but we are encouraging it as the question comes up.
Well, some of the things that we run into from government that it feels like they're trying to prevent people from being sustainable. So I guess I'll raise some of those issues with you. One is, of course, restrictions on solar. We have a number of communities in the country that will tell you either you cannot put solar on buildings that face the road or can be seen from your neighbor's home or things of that nature, as if it's a tremendous blight on the landscape. Other things, tiny house designations, restrictions where people say, I want to live in a smaller unit, and then you have restrictions that prevent that. Gardens within people's homes, whether
or the front yard,
gardens, things of that nature. So how do you balance that? Where New Concord is a pretty little town. It has that kind of little town feel. You want to maintain that. You want to
Absolutely.
to create a quaintness. A period.
Right.
Sensibility.
Right.
But then we also have these other things like smaller homes, solar arrays, gardens in the front yard. How do you make that work?
So we don't necessarily have any restrictions on gardens. That's not an issue. We actually have a community garden in town. It's run by a private group, but it's been encouraged by the village. We think that it's a wonderful addition to our village, and they work really closely with our local food pantry. So a portion of whatever's grown is donated directly to the food pantry for fresh produce, which is pretty neat. In terms of balancing that, desire from our residents and our businesses for sustainable implements and elements of their homes or buildings, we just have to look and see what they're looking to do. I think that we're going to approach most of these things on a situational standpoint and understand what impact is it going to have on your neighbors and the surrounding community, and if it's a negative impact or if it's perceived as a negative impact, is there a way to shift it a little bit or change it to where it's something that everyone can live with. I think that that's usually our approach. We don't typically come out and just say, nope, not going to happen. I think all of us are willing to have the conversation on, this is a pretty cool idea. Let's see if we can make it work somehow. We've not been approached by anyone on the tiny house front yet. I think it's interesting. I've been following it. I've seen other cities designate areas for that. We just haven't seen it yet. But that's another one that's, if it comes to us, we'll talk about it.
Well, that's great. Well, another issue, which we have talked to you about before, has to do with broadband access and having high-speed broadband. And that's such a challenge, especially if you're trying to attract entrepreneurial businesses and different things like that.
Or even trying to do your homework.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's not a luxury; it's really a right. And if you were Verizon, you would be in jail for fraud because no, it's the truth, because they say they
allegedly, right?
They say they sell a certain speed, and actually, if you were to measure it every minute of every day, you would see it never even. It doesn't ever even get close.
Okay, Annie, I'm going to redirect you back to New Concord.
So I'm jealous that you have access to Verizon. I live about 20 minutes outside of the community. I have satellite internet, so you're probably better off than we are.
Maybe slightly, but not by much. It's not a contest because it's all bad.
Oh, no. So in the village, I totally understand. We've had this conversation before. In the village corp limits, we actually have access to pretty good broadband internet access. The areas that we see where it's challenging, obviously, when we talk about our community, we're not talking about our corp limits. We're talking about our school district boundaries, which encompass 2 counties. So it's those folks who use New Concord as a hub for banking, shopping, school, faith, whatever the case may be. Those folks, they may not, like myself, have access to cell service or broadband internet. And then we do see those challenges of doing your homework, operating your small business out of your home, whatever the case may be. I know that the state is working on some broadband grants, and I think that Muskingum County is looking into how can we access some of this money.
We would like them to
would
think
be
about
wonderful.
us as business, but you know what they're looking at is things like giving it to the hospital or giving it to the downtown.
I agree.
It's like,
Yeah.
geez, why
Yeah.
don't they ask people what they need? Because it's ridiculous.
Right. So that's where we need more of a focus on that rural last mile area. That's what that money is really for, from what I understand. And I think that we really need to focus on that and use it the way that it's, I believe, is intended, is getting access to that last mile, getting access to those folks who really need it, and allowing our rural towns and unincorporated areas the opportunity to grow or to just be competitive if they want to be. So in town, because we have a university and we have lots of students who are willing to look and do research projects for us and things like that. We've talked about, the potential for looking at fiber optics and beefing up our in-town situation and just researching it. So I think that's something that we'll probably be starting next year. I don't know where it's going to lead, but it's definitely something that I'm interested in. I'm working with a couple of professors to talk about it. So it's a challenge, absolutely. And
okay, well, speaking of challenges, we've got about 2 minutes left. What's keeping you up at night? I mean, what is the challenge that you see? Not just from sustainability, but from managing a village. I mean, you're basically the mom of your village here. How are you going to deal with that?
Right. So there's lots of moving parts. There's never enough money, never enough staff, and so many demands. This is true of anywhere you work, no matter whether it's a really large city or a tiny little town. I've seen it in the city of Dublin that has so much money it's ridiculous, and in New Concord, because as residents, they're the folks who live in our communities. They expect certain services. They want certain services. They want new things that are coming down the pipe, and they're asking, can this happen? Can this happen? And we'd love to provide more than what we do. It's just finding that funding to be able to do it. And we're definitely trying to find that funding. That's part of what I do, is I look at grant funds. I work with our engineering firm, others, to say what's out there on the horizon that we could access and really get some money to help us do these different projects. We just received some money through a NatureWorks grant to refurbish our pool complex, which is pretty awesome. So it's going to be about an $80,000 project where we're going to do a lot of really neat components. So that keeps me up, just trying to figure out, how are we going to move staff around to be able to do all the things that we need to do. We're talking about adding some seasonals in our operations department, if that will fit into our budget, and looking at our police force, and should we be adding someone else or not, or how does that all work? So those are the issues that usually keep me up at night, just that staffing piece and making sure that we're prepared and ready for whatever's coming.
What do you think's the best advice you ever received? Yeah.
Give us your advice, quick, 5 seconds.
So change is inevitable. Trust your gut, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know.
Okay.
There you go.
All right.
Okay, well, you have been listening to When the Biomass Hits the Wind Turbine with Jay and Annie Warmke. We want to thank our guest, Charlotte Colley, and our award-winning producer, Adam Rich, sitting behind the glass. And we want to thank you for spending just a bit of time with us. And as your grandmother hopefully probably told you, the secret to a happy and sustainable life is...
Play nice with others, clean up your own mess, and let's get ready for climate change.
All right, till next time.
Mother Earth will sing, and her children will be healed. 'Cause I see the morning glory blossom in the night. Know the stars dancing in the twilight. Soon we'll be together, all will be revealed. Mother Earth will sing, and her children will be healed.
You can find more information on living sustainably in our unsustainable world at bluerockstation.com.